Welcome to the screencast today on Active Directory programming with Visual Studio. Today we're going to focus on adding a user to Active Directory using the Directory Services namespace in the .NET framework. My name is Robert Shelton Jr. and I'm a .NET evangelist for Microsoft Federal. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to add a reference for the system directory services namespace within .NET. So adding system.directory services, and then the next thing I have to do is put in my using statement so that I could code against that particular namespace, the system.directory services. Okay, now that I've got my namespace identified, I've created this structure that will hold the user info. And as you can see, my variable names map directly to the Active Directory attributes that I'm listing here on the side. So for example, for email address in Active Directories, it's called mail. There is a list of attributes that I'll tell you about in the resources slide at the end. So now that I've got that structure set up, I'm going to go ahead and use it, instantiate a new user info object, which will hold all the values that I'm going to pump into Active Directory for a user object that I'm going to create a little bit later. So I'm going to go ahead and create the set of values for the first name for this particular new user. And again, I'm going to go ahead and set another value for the last name. I think I'll do one more, and then with the magic of video, I'll go ahead and fast forward to the rest of the properties being filled out. So go ahead and do the initials, it's JS, and then we'll go ahead and paste the rest in there. Okay, now that I've done that, there's a couple of required values that we have to fill out here. There's SAM account name and the common name, which I have as user name here. Alright, so your required values may differ for your Active Directory implementation. Alright, the next thing that I'm going to do here is create a directory entry object that will represent my user folder. So directory entry, name of your variable, equals new directory entry. Next thing you have to do is give it the path of the folder. In this case it's LDAP, semicolon whack whack. Alright, so the CN or common name for the user folder is users within the domain context of my Active Directory, which is ours lab, domain context local. Your other domain context could be .com or .net or whatever the case may be. Okay, close that off. And just to show you, if I didn't have the rights to do this, I could pass a username and password and an authentication type within this code. Alright, so now that that's done, the next thing I need to do is to verify that the folder that I'm going to add a user to is actually a container. You can't add objects to folders that aren't containers. So I'm doing a schema entry check on the name of that folder that I gave a path to find out if it's actually a container or not. If it's not, I can't add the user. That's okay. So then, if it is a container, the next thing I want to do is to go ahead and create a directory entry object that will represent my new user. In this case, I'm going to call it new user. So go ahead and instantiate that as a directory entry on the user's folder. It's children's .add, and then I give it the common name for the user I'm about to add, which in this case is in my user info username. All right. User info username, and then the last thing I have to do is to tell it what kind of object I'm adding, which is user here versus printer or computer. Okay, close that off. Then the next thing I'm going to do is remove the user if they already exist. So I'm going to use my directory entry class, use the exists, and I give it the path of the thing that I want to check to see if it actually exists. So in this case, a new user path. Alright, and then if they do exist, in this case, I'm going to actually just go ahead and delete the user. There we go. So in this case, I'm going to actually delete the inform you that the user exists. So I'm going to do a quick console write line to say that this user with the username already exists. All right, get that in there. I'll use the new user object that user name and say that they already exist. And that they will be deleted. Again, you may want to give your users an option to not overwrite or overwrite. Okay, so if they do exist, the next thing I'm going to do is on the user folder, the children collection, I'm going to do a remove, and I just have to give it the path of the thing that I want to remove, or actually the object, so a new directory entry, and again I give it the new user path, and then that tells it what to remove in this case. Alright, so now that I've done that, the next thing I need to do is to go ahead and set the properties or the attribute values within the Active Directory store to the values for my new user. So the first one I'm going to do is the SAM account name. I'm going to set its value to equal my new user info SAM account name, which is what I called it, and go ahead and paste in the rest. And then the last thing we have to do is to commit the changes, otherwise they won't actually be saved in Active Directory, so you have to do the commit changes in order for that to happen. Now that I have a user actually in Active Directory, I can go ahead and set the password. You can't set the password on a user until you've actually created and they exist in Active Directory. So I'm going to use the invoke method, and I'm going to pass it tell it to do the set password call, and I need to also give it a password, which I'll hard code in for this example, and obviously you wouldn't do this in production code. So I set the password here. Alright, and then now that I've done that, I can enable the user. So I'll go ahead and do the new user properties, and I'll set the value of the user account control attribute to equal that value to equal 0x0200, which is the value to enable. There'll be a URL at the end of the demo that will point you to where you can get the other values for user account control and other things as well. Of course, now what I have to do is go ahead and commit those changes. So I'll do a new user dot commit changes, close parentheses, semicolon. Alright, so now that we've done that, let me put my code back in here to let us know that they've been successfully created. Let's look at Active Directory to see make sure that J. Smith is not already there. Refresh, he's not there. Alright, minimize that. Let's go ahead and do the build and run. Yeah, I'll go ahead and save it. Okay, now it's running. Takes a moment here to spin everything up, especially with Active Directory, but I'll get a message saying that the user was successfully created if we did everything right. It should happen here in a second. Alright, there we go. Hit any key to continue. I'll go back to Active Directory, go back to the user folder, hit refresh, and we'll see J. Smith is there. And not only that, when we go look at some of the properties, we can see that there's the values we put in: his last name, his display name, his phone number. And with that, the last thing I want to show you is the resources slide. First thing I want to point out is the Federal Developer Weblog, where you can find out about this screencast and many other things, including other screencasts. And then the two URL links that I told you about in the demonstration. One is a list of all the Active Directory attributes and the user account control attribute value. And lastly, I want to thank you for viewing this screencast. And again, my name is Robert Shelton Jr.